Hello, you have joined the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board's, or CSB's, public business meeting. We will now begin this meeting with Steve Owens, the chairperson of the CSB.
Well, thank you, Brian, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Steve Owens. As Brian said, I'm the chairperson of the Chemical Safety Board. CSB has been very busy since our last public meeting in January. We've been working hard to rebuild and revitalize this agency, including filling critical vacancies in our investigation staff, improving our IT infrastructure and cybersecurity protections, and recruiting much needed support in our administrative team. We also have a new board member. In February, Kathy Sandoval formally joined the CSB. As you may recall, we invited Kathy to participate in our January meeting since she had been confirmed by the Senate at that time, but this is her first official public meeting as a member of the CSB board. In addition to addressing our significant staffing and technology needs, we've continued to reduce the backlog in investigation reports. As you may recall, we issued 6 reports in the last few months of last year, and we just issued another report on Monday of this week, this one on the toxic gas release and fire at the biolab facility in Westlake, Louisiana in August 2020. And you'll hear a presentation about that report later on in this meeting. We still got a long way to go, but our goal is to eliminate the backlog in reports by the end of this calendar year. And our updated plan for completing the reports is posted on the CSB website. Additionally, last month, we issued a new safety alert that focuses on potential hazards of emergency discharges from pressure release valves. The alert highlights 4 incidents investigated by the CSB that together resulted in 19 deaths and over 200 injuries. We've also been ramping up the CSB's outreach and advocacy efforts and have made more information available to the public, including posting updated data from our accidental release reporting rule. As of last week, the data we've received under the rule covers 257 chemical incidents that resulted in fatalities at 36 facilities, serious injuries at 141 facilities, and substantial property damage at more than 121 facilities nationwide. On a different matter, I'd like to take a moment to note 2 prior investigations by the CSB that have been in the news lately, which underscore the incredibly important work done by this agency and the significant role that the CSB plays in protecting communities from chemical disasters. Earlier this week, it was announced that DuPont pled guilty and was fined $12 million in connection with the deadly 2014 methyl mercaptan release at the company's facility in La Porte, Texas. The facility was closed permanently after the CSB's report was issued in 2015. Additionally, last week, April 17th marked 10 years since the deadly fire and explosion in West Texas, where 30 tons of fertilizer-grade ammonium nitrate detonated, resulting in 15 fatalities, more than 260 injuries, and incredible damage to more than 150 buildings in the area, including homes, schools, a nursing home, businesses, and other structures. Numerous articles appeared around the country remembering this horrific event and the terrible impact it had on the local community. Based on our investigation of this terrible tragedy, the CSB made a number of recommendations for greater oversight of ammonium nitrate, including that EPA should add ammonium nitrate to the list of regulated substances under EPA's risk management program, and that OSHA should add ammonium nitrate to the list of highly hazardous chemicals under OSHA's process safety management standard. Unfortunately, neither EPA nor OSHA has implemented those recommendations yet, but we're being persistent and we're continuing to work with EPA and OSHA on this issue. In fact, EPA advised us earlier this year that the agency intends to evaluate the inclusion of ammonium nitrate on the RMP list in a future action. During today's meeting, we'll hear presentations from CSB staff on a variety of topics, including recommendation status changes recently adopted by the board and a presentation on our report from the biolab investigation. But before I turn the floor over to my fellow board members, I want to address just one bit of housekeeping. At the end of today's presentations, we'll provide an opportunity for public comment. In the interest of time, we ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes, and please use the icon on your screen to raise your hand so that you can be recognized to speak. If you prefer to submit written comments instead of speaking, you can send them to the following email address. It's public@csb.gov. That's public, P-U-B-L-I-C, @csb.gov. Now I'd like to turn this over to Board Member Sylvia Johnson for her remarks, and then to Board Member Kathy Sandoval. Sylvia, please go ahead, and then Kathy, please do so as well when Sylvia is concluded. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and welcome everyone to our quarterly board meeting. I too would like to officially welcome Kathy Sandoval to the CSB. As Steve said, we introduced her at our last meeting, and she's now been sworn in and has already hit the ground running. We're doing a lot of great work to advance the mission of the agency, and Kathy has stepped into that role and done it very nicely. Since our last public board meeting, as Steve said, the board has been heavily engaged in stakeholder meetings, several of which have been in person. To date, we've met with leaders and staff of the American Chemistry Council, the American Fuel and Petroleum Manufacturers, the National Association of Chemical Distributors, and most recently, on behalf of the CSB, I presented at the United Steelworkers Health, Safety, and Environment Conference, as well as to the National Safety Council's Executive Business Issues Forum. In both, I provided an overview of the work we've done to rebuild and revitalize the CSB. Before I turn it over to Kathy, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that tomorrow, April 28th, has been designated as Workers' Memorial Day. April 28th was selected as that date marks the legislative anniversary of the passage of the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. It is a day of mourning for workers who have tragically died on the job. This is not only a day to pause and reflect on workplace tragedies that have taken the lives of individuals at work sites around the country, but also a day to recommit ourselves to doing all that we can to ensure that workers do not continue to die because of their jobs. According to data from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, still 14 worker fatalities happen every single day. As we take time to honor those who have lost their lives due to occupational hazards, let us all redouble our efforts to ensure all workers safely return home to their loved ones at the end of their day. The safety of workers is tantamount to what informs our work here at the CSB. I encourage you to go to our website and read our statement on Workers' Memorial Day in full. Thank you, and now to you, Kathy.
Thank you very much, and thank you first and foremost to Steve Owens, our CSB chairperson, and to Dr. Sylvia Johnson for your support and your warm welcome. And thank you to all of the staff of the CSB. I really appreciate all of your welcome and support. And of course, thank you to President Biden for his nomination for me to serve as a CSB board member, and to the US Senate for their confirmation by unanimous consent. I'm greatly honored by this opportunity and dedicated to working with the board, the staff, and the public to promote safety. So as Sylvia mentioned, we've also been busy with not only the business of the CSB and collaborating with the staff to try to move forward with our investigations, make sure that we have the appropriate resources available so that we can timely complete our investigations, and also consider and respond to ongoing incidents. In addition to that, we've had an all hands meeting. We've also collaborated with the investigators on their training, and we have had a number of outreach meetings. In addition to those that Sylvia mentioned, I also participated in a conference by Hispanics in Energy by the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, was at the United Steelworkers Conference, Health and Safety Conference last week. I was honored to be the speaker at Hampton University's Honors College Convocation, as they are training the next generation of scientists and leaders. And just this morning, I spoke at a virtual conference hosted by Orange, the French telecommunications company. This was hosted by Orange Silicon Valley on artificial intelligence and smart nations. So we had speakers from Brazil and Las Vegas and myself, and And then our hosts were in France, and people joined us from all over the world as we look at new opportunities. And this is something that actually the American chemistry industry has looked at, new opportunities for artificial intelligence to help to integrate information, to become part of the knowledge infrastructure that must be put within the context of our of safety process and safety principles. And we also talked about the NIST framework, which has just been adopted, looking at principles for human-centered design and accountable AI, building on some of the principles that have been discussed by OECD and others. So it's just a sense of where we're going in the world. The CSB has already seen through its past investigations examples where lack of sensors, or what I call under sensoring, contributed to incidents, as it basically diminished the operator's awareness of what was going on. And so as we look at things like AI as part of our knowledge infrastructure, that also emphasizes the need to look at issues like proper censoring, proper monitoring of knowledge, and proper integration to really aid people in being able to operate safely, so that we can promote safety, protect workers, protect the public, protect the environment, and help achieve equitable sustainability and opportunity. So thanks again for this opportunity, and it's been a pleasure to collaborate with all of my colleagues here and to serve the American public. Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you, Sylvia. And thank you, Kathy. And again, Kathy, we're delighted that you are officially on board with us. I know it took a while, but we've been all doing great work together, and there's a lot going on at the CSB. And now we'll turn it over for the presentations from our staff. I'll turn it over to Steve Kleist, who's our Executive Director of Investigations and Recommendations at the CSB. Steve?
Well, thank you, Steve. I'd like to begin with a recruitment update. We are in the final stages of the onboarding process for the most recent recruitment action that includes 3 chemical incident investigators and a supervisor. We are also in the process of initiating additional recruitment actions for investigators that includes positions to support the accidental release reporting rule program. And for this particular recruitment action, we'll be using the Pathways recruitment process to assist us in acquiring the individuals with the proper skills and backgrounds necessary to advance our mission. As additional resources are available, we will continue to add to our investigative capacity to execute the agency's core mission. And I'll keep everyone advised as to our progress with regard to our recruitment efforts. The first presentation will be done by Chuck Barbie, our Director of Recommendations, and he will be providing an update on 5 investigation status changes that were recently approved by the board. So Chuck, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'll wait for the slides to come up. Okay, so today we're going to highlight the following 5 recommendations. The first is from the U.S. Inc. Fire, and that's R1 to OSHA. The next 2 are from the Aghorn Operating Water Flood Station hydrogen sulfide release, and that's R8 to OSHA, and R9 to the Railroad Commission of Texas. The next one is from Donaldson Enterprises Incorporated, Fatal Fireworks Disassembly Explosion and Fire, and that's R11 to EPA. And as our chairman, Steve Owens, mentioned earlier, gave the highlights on, the West Fertilizer Explosion and Fire, which is R3 to EPA. All right, so let's jump right in. As far as the U.S. Inc. Fire goes, on October 9th, 2012, during a startup, and the startup, they were doing some things. One of those was to bring a new dust collection system online. Well, unfortunately, dust collected in that dust collection system, as it was intended to do, mixed with hydrocarbons, ignited, and started a flash fire, which spread throughout the facility. That flash fire, the consequences of that were 7 workers sustained burn injuries, 3 of which were 3rd degree. As a result of the investigation, amongst the other recommendations, we issued R1 to OSHA, and that was to add NAICS code. And NAICS is North American Industry Classification System, for those of you not aware, 325910, which is the printing ink manufacturing code, to the list of industries in the Combustible Dust National Emphasis Program. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a little bit of advocacy on one of the things. For many years, we've asked OSHA to develop a combustible dust standard. Now, that's a tremendous undertaking for those of you, and we understand that. But typically what they will do in lieu of a standard is they will develop a national emphasis program where they target some of these issues and the industries in which they would apply. And this would be one of those. So like I say, we asked them to add that additional NAICS code. And then lo and behold, in January of 2023, they revised the Combustible Dust National Emphasis Program, and they did add that NAICS code for printing ink manufacturing. And as a result of that, the board voted to close this recommendation with acceptable action. As I said, the next couple of recommendations comes from the Aghorn Operating Inc. water flood station hydrogen sulfide release. And this happened in Odessa, Texas. On October 26th of 2019, a worker responded to a faulty pump, went in, started to look at the pump, was beginning to sort of disassemble part of it, but did not secure the energy to the pump. As a result, it came on in auto. Then water with hydrogen sulfide was discharged into that confined building that you see beside the 2 tanks. And as a result, the worker was overcome and fatally injured. Later on that evening, his spouse was wondering where he was at. He hadn't responded, hadn't come home. So she went to the site, investigated, went into the building, and also was overcome by hydrogen sulfide and was also fatally injured. Very, very tragic situation. As a result, we issued several recommendations. In this particular case, R8 to OSHA. We asked them to issue a safety information product that addresses the requirements for protecting workers from hazardous air contaminants, like hydrogen sulfide, and from hazardous energy, like the power that caused that pump to come back on. And OSHA, the way they implemented R8 is in January of 2023. They were busy in January. They published a fatal facts guidance document entitled Hydrogen Sulfide Releases. And within that document, they addressed all the requirements of the recommendation and threw in a few more other safety tidbits as well. So I highly recommend you go to their website, and look that up. As a result of their action, the board voted to close this recommendation, also acceptable action. In addition to the OSHA recommendation, we also issued a recommendation to the Railroad Commission of Texas. We asked them to send out a notice to operators describing the safety issues that were identified in the Aghorn report. And in February of 2023, the Railroad Commission of Texas did distribute that notice to operators. And, in addition to, just talking about the Aghorn report, we asked them to include personal hydrogen sulfide detectors, lockout tagout information, hydrogen or confinement within a pump house that may have hydrogen sulfide, safety management program, hydrogen sulfide detection alarm system, and site security. And they addressed every bit of it. And so as a result, the board voted to close this recommendation with acceptable action. Next recommendation comes from the Donaldson Enterprises Incorporated Fatal Fireworks Disassembly Explosion and Fire. This occurred in April of 2011 in Hawaii. I'm going to call Donaldson Enterprises Incorporated DEI. DEI used the magazine that they had for seized fireworks, as well as disposal of related activities. As DEI's firework disposal operation evolved, there were major hazards that were introduced from disassembling and accumulating of lots of seized fireworks. Eventually, there was an explosion and 5 fatalities resulted. We issued several recommendations from that investigation, and in this case, we're going to talk about R11 to EPA. We asked that they participate in the NFPA's standard development process to develop guidance on the safe and environmentally sound disposal of fireworks. And EPA, they participated right off the bat as a principal member of the committee, and that began November 13th of 2016. We have solid records of them continuing that participation, and NFPA is expected to release the final version of the recommended practice in the fall of 2023. And as a result of EPA's action, the board voted to close this recommendation acceptable action. Lastly, we're going to talk about West Fertilizer Explosion and Fire. Again, Chairman Steve Owens mentioned this at the beginning of the presentation, but on April 17th of 2013 in West Texas, fertilizer grade ammonium nitrate at the fertilizer facility exploded. And like I say, these explosions are just tremendous. I think folks, probably the most recent one that we've seen is the one that happened in Beirut. Large scale explosion, very similar thing here. It pretty much wiped out the town. There were 12 emergency responders and 3 members of the public that were fatally injured, and more than 260 other people sustained injuries as well. And the offsite damage, again, more than 150 buildings. As a result, we asked EPA, amongst other things, to revise the risk management plan rule to include fertilizer grade ammonium nitrate at the appropriate threshold quantity on their list of regulated substances. Now, I'll take a couple of minutes here, similar to what Chairman Steve Owens did at the beginning of the presentation, and talk, our oldest recommendations right now, we have 1 to OSHA and 1 to EPA, to revise their list of highly hazardous chemicals for OSHA, and for EPA to revise their list of regulated substances. Both of those were to include reactive hazards. And again, this is a tremendous undertaking, and we're very, very well aware of this. Also, as a part of this list of regulated substance update, we did ask in this particular case that FGAN, fertilizer grade ammonium nitrate, be added to the list. Now, initially, EPA, like all other federal agencies, very busy. Initially, they did not have an interest to do that. And so this recommendation was closed unacceptable. However, as recently as August, a Federal Register notice went out where they talked about updating the RMP program, the RMP rule. They discussed reviewing the list of regulated substances, and they were going to target fertilizer grade ammonium nitrate as a priority chemical to review. February 7th, they officially gave us notice of the same thing directly via correspondence. And as a result, I like to call this turning the frown upside down. We reopened that recommendation as acceptable response or alternate response, thanks to the most recent set of board votes. Now, for those of you that were paying attention, these recommendations have a common theme, and that is they're all regulators. This particular quarter, The regulators have really stepped up their game, and we closed a lot of recommendations from them. As a matter of fact, they were an overwhelming majority of the recommendations that were closed in the last 3 months. And so we're taking this opportunity to basically say thank you to OSHA, EPA, and the Railroad Commission of Texas, and say good job and keep up the good work. And with that, I will pass things back to Steve. Thank you.
Well, Chuck, thank you very much for that presentation. I'd also like to thank your recommendations team, Amanda Johnson and Adam Henson, for the fine work that they do to allow the agency to advance safety and to bring these recommendations to their successful closure. So thank you to your entire team. The next presentation will focus on the agency's most recently issued investigation report on the Biolab Lake Charles incident. Brian, if we could have that next presentation up, please. Thank you. On August 27th, 2020, there was an accidental release event that took place at the Biolab Lake Charles facility in Westlake, Louisiana. Brian, if I got the next slide, please. The CSB, as I said earlier, recently had an investigation report approved by the board and closed this particular investigation. I would like to thank the members of the investigation team with Vanzella Vincent as the investigator in charge, who will be making the presentation this afternoon with the key findings from the investigation. Also, I'd like to recognize Butch Griffin, investigator who was providing support on scene along with Ben Schrader, and Bill Steiner, who also provided support in the follow-up activities that again led to a fine report that was produced. And last but not least, I would like to thank Lauren Grimm, who is the supervisory chemical incident investigator responsible for the overall investigation process. So Vanzella, I'd like to turn the presentation over to you, so please proceed.
Thank you, Director Kleiss. I will first give information on the Biolab Lake Charles facility's background. The facility was built in the late 1970s in the Calcasieu Parish in Westlake, Louisiana, near Lake Charles, and is currently owned by Kick Custom Products. The facility manufactures and supplies pool and spar chemicals. Trichloroisomeric acid, also referred to as TCCA, is one of those chemicals and was involved in the incident. TCCA is a chlorinating agent often used as a sanitizer to kill algae and bacteria in large volumes of water, predominantly in swimming pools and hot tubs. In large bodies of water, the TCCA is soluble and breaks down slowly, releasing chlorine in the water to sanitize contaminants. When TCCA instead comes in contact with or is wetted by a small amount of water and does not dissolve, it can experience a chemical reaction, generating heat and causing the decomposition of the chemical, which in turn produces toxic chlorine gas. On August 27th, 2020, after Category 4 Hurricane Laura tore through the facility, rainwater contacted the stored chlorinated pool chemical, initiating a chemical reaction, decomposition, and fire. One production building was destroyed, Plant 4. Additional structures, including the finished goods warehouse, were damaged. The local community was put at risk of being exposed to toxic chlorine gas. A shelter-in-place order was issued for local residencies, and Interstate 10 near the facility was closed for more than 28 hours. There were no reported injuries. The company has invested approximately $250 million in redesigning and completely reconstructing the damaged facility, and has resumed its production operations. The investigation team identified the following 5 safety issues in its investigation. Number 1, extreme weather preparation. BioLab did not implement industry guidance for extreme weather preparation that was updated and published after the 2012 Acoma incident, which occurred after extensive flooding from Category 4 Hurricane Harvey. As a result, the company was unprepared for the winds produced by Category 4 Hurricane Laura. Safety issue number 2, process hazard analyses implementation. TCCA is not covered by OSHA's Process Safety Management Standard. However, BioLab Lake Charles voluntarily implemented some elements of the PSM standard, including periodically conducting PHAs. BioLab's 2010 PHA recommended that the Lake Charles facility consider evaluating the warehouse roof structure for hurricane conditions. Verify the warehouse is built to withstand high winds. But the company did not implement the recommendation. If BioLab had implemented the 2010 PHA recommendation, it could have identified that the facility buildings were susceptible to damage from hurricane strength winds. Issue number 3, emergency preparedness and response. BioLab experienced serious delays, approximately 5.5 hours, in responding to the TCCA decomposition and fire due to an inadequate and largely non-functional fire protection system and the absence of automated sprinkler systems. The company did not adequately maintain its fire protection system to ensure its functionality and did not ensure that enough of its staff, including its assigned hurricane crew, knew how to activate the rental backup generator, which was necessary to operate electrically powered fire protection equipment during the power outage caused by the hurricane. Number 4, adherence to applicable hazardous material codes. The BioLab Lake Charles facility, as previously stated, built in 1979, did not conform to the safeguards identified in the NFPA 101 Life Safety Code for high hazard industrial occupancies, which required automatic extinguishing systems or other protection to minimize danger to occupants before they have time to evacuate. BioLab also did not conform to the NFPA 400 Hazardous Materials Code, which required a fire detection system and an automatic fire sprinkler system, which Louisiana requires adherence to for structures built or remodeled after July 1, 2017. And number 5, regulatory coverage of reactive chemical hazards. OSHA and the EPA currently use predefined chemical lists to identify the processes subject to coverage under the PSM standard and the RMP rule. The Chemical Safety Board's reactive hazard study, published in 2002, concluded that OSHA and the EPA did not adequately consider reactive chemical hazards when developing these chemical lists. And as a result, many reactive chemicals, including TCCA, are not covered by these regulations. This regulatory coverage gap, 1, points to a weakness in relying on fixed chemical lists to determine regulatory coverage. 2, contributed to this incident, and 3, contributed to many other reactive chemical incidents over the past 3 decades. The cause. The Chemical Safety Board determined that the cause of the accidental release of chlorine gas from the Biolab Lake Charles facility was rainwater contacting stored TCCA, which initiated a chemical reaction, decomposition, and fire after Category 4 Hurricane Laura winds damaged portions of the facility's building roofs that were not built to current wind design requirements. Contributing to the incident were Biolab's inadequate preparation for extreme weather and its deficient PHA action item management system. Also contributing to the incident was insufficient regulatory coverage of the chemicals with reactive hazards. Contributing to the severity of the incident were Biolab's inadequate and largely non-functional fire protection system and the absence of automatic extinguishing systems. To prevent future chemical incidents and in the interest of driving chemical safety change to protect communities, workers, and the environment, the Chemical Safety Board makes the following safety recommendations. The recommendations issued to Biolab Lake Charles include 1, evaluate the hazards to the facility from extreme weather and implement processes and safeguards for the protection against those hazards. 2, develop and implement an improved PHA action item management system that ensures action items or recommendations are properly documented, assigned, and tracked until resolved. Also, periodically audit the system. Number 3, perform PHAs on all buildings and units processing or storing TCCA. Ensure that the PHAs are revalidated at least every 5 years. And 4, revise the Biolab Lake Charles Emergency Response Plan to require proper maintenance and routine function tests of the fire protection system, regular checks of emergency equipment, in particular fire water pumps, to ensure good working condition, and training at least 1 month before the start of hurricane season. The Chemical Safety Board issues Louisiana the following recommendation under statutory or regulatory authority. For all existing chemical manufacturing and storage facilities that 1, are located in a hurricane-prone region and manufacture or store or can produce regulated substances inside equipment or buildings built before more current wind design requirements came into effect, require the facility operators to evaluate the hazards to their facilities from hurricanes and accompanying winds, rainwater, flood water, or storm surge forces, and implement processes and safeguards for protection against those hazards. To OSHA, the Chemical Safety Board reiterates recommendation R1 from the Reactive Hazard Study that states, amend the Process Safety Management Standard to achieve more comprehensive control of reactive hazards that could have catastrophic consequences. To the EPA, the Chemical Safety Board reiterates recommendation R3 from the Reactive Hazard Study. Revise the accidental release prevention requirements to explicitly cover catastrophic reactive hazards that have the potential to seriously impact the public, including those resulting from self-reactive chemicals and combinations of chemicals and process-specific conditions. And last, the Chemical Safety Board also issued a new recommendation to the EPA to implement the 5 open recommendations issued in the 2022 U.S. Government Accountability Office report titled Chemical Accident Prevention. EPA should ensure regulated facilities cover risks from climate change. This concludes the highlights from the BioLab Lake Charles presentation. And at this time, I will turn it back to Director Kleiss.
Well, thank you, Von Zeller, for your fine work, and to that of your team for bringing this investigation to a successful closure. Your work in this investigation reinforces the importance for an operator to fully understand and identify risks and hazards associated with this operation. And again, thank you for your fine work to bring this issue forward, with hopes that others will benefit from the learning that takes place with the issuance of this report. This concludes the staff presentations for this meeting. I will now turn the presentation back to Steve Owens.
I was muted there. Sorry about that. I was going to say thank you, Steve, and thank you, Von Zeller, for your great work on getting this report done. As the slides show, there were a number of people who contributed to and participated in the preparation of the report and the investigation itself. And it's really part of the work that we're doing here at the CSB to have greater team efforts on these reports so that we can get them done in a timely fashion and also address the many issues that come up in the investigations. Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, just one quick thing about the BioLab report. It also includes, as an appendix to the report, a summary of a couple of additional incidents that occurred at a BioLab facility in Conyers, Georgia, later in 2020, in September 2020. Is that correct?
That is correct. There was a similar type of an incident that took place in BioLab's Conyers, Georgia facility, and the essential elements of that incident were incorporated into what we presented today and the board voted on, the BioLab Lake Charles report, just to ensure that everyone has the totality of the events that have taken place within that organization.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, just wanted to, we've had questions in the past about both the Lake Charles incident and the incidents in Conyers, Georgia. So just wanted to make sure people were aware that those were included in this report as well. So well, great. Thank you so much. As we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we have some time left here. We're going to open up the floor for public comments. As I mentioned also, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And in order to be recognized, please find a little icon on your computer and raise your hand so that Brian can recognize you and we can address you address your comments as best we can. So Brian, take it away.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, so if anyone would like to be recognized, please use the raise your hand caption or button, and we'll recognize you and unmute you and essentially bring you to the stage. Khalid.
Hi, yeah, my name's Khalid. I'm a third-year PhD student at Cal Berkeley, and I was wondering about. I had more of a question on this TCCA incident. I guess how prevalent do you think these sorts of storage facilities are around the country? Because I know you mentioned there's also the one in Georgia, and then sort of more of a broader question. What maybe are some other examples of these chemicals that present reactive hazards, but aren't covered by the EPA, but perhaps should be?
Let me just say up the front, Khalid, I believe you were on our call in January as well. So good to have you back, weren't you? I think your name sounds familiar and your background sounds familiar. So I think you're muted, but I think you were on the call. So we appreciate you participating again. we generally try not to go into any great detail in responding to specific questions, but in this case, I may ask Steve Kleiss just to address your in a broad sense the question you asked about other facilities and other types of reactive products, and if Steve feels comfortable doing that.
Yes, Biolab is not the only manufacturer of these types of products, and the reactivity issues with these types of chlorinated products are not limited to just those chemicals that are normally used for disinfecting purposes in pools, hot tubs, etc. So the real issue here, and of course it was highlighted with the unique facts, circumstances, and conditions of the Biolab incident at both Lake Charles and the Westlake, Louisiana, and the Conyers facility, was the risks identified in the report. But we would like to make sure that other manufacturers that are engaged in this type of chemical production are aware of these hazards and take the appropriate action to prevent such an occurrence, and also, should an occurrence take place, to have processes in place to mitigate the consequences of these types of reactive incidents that take place.
Great. Thank you, Steve. And again, thank you, Khalid, for participating and for your comments and questions.
Steve, we'll recognize Richard Rosera. I've asked you to unmute. If you want to unmute, you can have the floor.
Thanks very much. I wanted to compliment the CSB on improving, I think, the website so that there's more information on it. However, I did want to ask one question. I noticed that Catherine Sandoval does not yet have a profile up as a board member. So it would be good to add that if you can, as soon as possible.
Well,
That's all
Richard,
I have.
Well, Richard, great. Thank you. And again, thank you for participating today. I can assure you that fact has not gone unnoticed by the board. I know there have been some challenges with the website. The person who handles the website does tremendous work for us. And my understanding is that it's going to be up very soon. Kathy, you can nod your head yes if that's your understanding as well. So there we go. So Richard, we appreciate you highlighting that again for us, because we're working on all that to get that done. So.
If anyone else participate, again, feel free to use the raise your hand function and we'll recognize you to the stage.
All right, I may have to try to provoke people into commenting again like I did the last time, but
Steve, I'm not seeing hands raised.
All righty, well, we'll start moving toward resolution here. If anybody has one more comment or question, please raise your hand now or forever hold your peace, and at least for this call. The last thing I do want to say is just a reminder that we have these meetings quarterly, and our next public meeting is scheduled for Thursday, July the 27th at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern. A notice just went out from the CSB about that meeting in addition to this one, and we'll be sending out an additional notices in the future about that meeting as well. But again, that'll be on July the 27th. In the meantime, we'll be busy with a lot more working on issuing more reports and getting more information out to the public. So please stay tuned. Check the website regularly, Richard, looking for Kathy's bio and other information, and let us know if there's stuff on there that you see that we think we need to address, or if not on there that you would like to see, and maybe shoot us a note at the email address that I mentioned, which is thepublic@csb.gov. With that, I'll ask Sylvia and Kathy if they have any last comments, and then we'll wrap up. So.
I do not.
Okay, thank you.
Just thanks again and congratulations to the staff of the CSB and to the board members for their tremendous work as we work through the backlog and work to become even more responsive in looking at our investigations. I think we've brought forward some very important root cause analysis and recommendations as we deal with both existing and emerging hazards. So thank you for your work.
Right, and thank you again, everyone, for participating. We appreciate your interest in the CSB and your thoughts and your efforts in support of the CSB are very much appreciated by everybody involved with the agency. So we'll see you again in July, and appreciate again your participation today. So Brian, back to you.
That'll conclude today's presentation. I'll leave ways to contact the CSB board on the screen here in a few moments. Thank you, everyone, for joining today.